The hiss was the first thing I heard, a soft, sibilant whisper in the darkness. It was the sound of my hope deflating along with the air mattress. I shifted, trying to find a comfortable position, but it was useless. The plastic crinkled beneath me, cold and unforgiving. My back already ached, a dull, throbbing pain that radiated from my spine to my shoulders. I curled up tighter, pulling the thin, threadbare blanket around me. It offered little warmth. The room was always cold, a bone-chilling cold that seeped into my very marrow. I could hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the window frame, a mournful sound that echoed the emptiness inside me. My stomach growled a loud, insistent protest. I hadn't eaten much at dinner, just a small bowl of watery soup. Mom had said she wasn't hungry, but I knew she was lying. She always gave me the bigger portion, pretending she'd already eaten. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure up images of Texas. The smell of freshly cut grass, the taste of Mom's homemade chili, the feel of Mark's friendly slap on the back. But the memories were fading, becoming like old photographs, blurred and indistinct. I can't do this anymore, I thought, the words a silent scream in the darkness. I can't live like this. The thought of running away, a seed planted weeks ago, had taken root and was now growing, twisting its way around my heart. It was a dangerous thought, a desperate thought, but it was the only thought that offered even a glimmer of hope. I imagined myself walking down the road, the cool night air on my face, the stars my only companions. I imagined finding a place where I belonged, a place where I could sleep in a real bed, eat a real meal, and feel safe. The mattress continued to deflate, the hiss growing louder, mocking my dreams. I squeezed my eyes tighter, tears prickling at the corners. I just want to go home, I thought, the words a silent prayer to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. I just want to go home. Cameron sat slumped in his desk, his head resting on his hand, his eyes fixed on the textbook in front of him. The words blurred, swimming in a sea of exhaustion and despair. He hadn't slept well, again. The deflating mattress had seen to that. Mrs. Davis, his English teacher, watched him from her desk. She'd noticed a change in Cameron over the past few weeks. He used to be a bright, engaged student, eager to participate in class discussions. Now, he was withdrawn, his eyes shadowed with a sadness that she couldn't quite fathom. She tried talking to him, asking him if everything was okay. But he just shrugged, mumbled something about being tired, and avoided her gaze. She suspected there was more to the story, but she didn't want to pry. She knew that sometimes the best thing you could do was just be there, a silent presence, a watchful eye. During recess, Cameron sat alone on a bench, watching the other kids play. He longed to join them, to feel the thrill of the game, the camaraderie of friendship. But he felt like an outsider, a ghost haunting the edges of their world. A group of boys, led by a burly kid named Brad, approached him. Brad was known for his cruelty, his knack for finding the weak spots in others and exploiting them. "Hey, Simmons," Brad sneered. "What's with the sad face? Missing your mommy?" Cameron flinched, his cheeks burning with shame. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. He just stared at the ground, his fists clenched at his sides. "Look at him," another boy chimed in. "He's going to cry." The laughter of the boys echoed in Cameron's ears, a cruel symphony of humiliation. He felt a lump forming in his throat, tears threatening to spill over. He wanted to disappear, to vanish in a thin air. Sarah's hands ached, her fingers raw and chapped from washing dishes. The diner was busy tonight, a constant stream of hungry customers demanding her attention. The smell of grease and stale coffee clung to her clothes, a suffocating reminder of her endless toil. She glanced at the clock, her heart sinking. It was almost 9 p.m. Cameron would be home alone, probably trying to sleep on that wretched mattress. Guilt twisted in her stomach, a sharp, painful knot. She thought about the phone call she'd received from Mrs. Davis earlier that day. The teacher had expressed concern about Cameron's performance in school, his withdrawn behavior, his apparent exhaustion. Sarah had listened patiently, her heart breaking with every word. She knew she was failing her son. She knew she wasn't providing him with the life he deserved. She thought about Grandma Rose, her frail body confined to a hospital bed, her mind lost in the fog of Alzheimer's. She loved her mother, but the burden of caring for her was crushing. She felt like she was being pulled in two directions, torn between her duty to her mother and her love for her son. She finished her shift, her body aching with fatigue. She walked home slowly, the streets dark and deserted. She dreaded going back to the apartment, to the silence, to the emptiness. She longed for the days when she could come home to Cameron's smiling face, to the warmth of their shared laughter. She reached the apartment building, her steps heavy with despair. She climbed the stairs, her legs burning with exhaustion. She unlocked the door, her heart filled with a mixture of dread and anticipation. She found the house quiet, too quiet. Cameron was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a half-eaten bowl of cold cereal. He hadn't been hungry, but he knew he needed to eat something. He'd been feeling weak and dizzy lately, his body depleted of energy. He heard the door open, the sound of his mother's tired footsteps. He braced himself, anticipating another night of strained silence, of unspoken accusations. Cameron, Sarah's voice was weary. Her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "Hi, Mom," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. She walked over to the table, her eyes scanning his face. She saw the dark circles under his eyes, the pale complexion, the sadness that seemed to cling to him like a shroud. "How was school?" she asked, trying to sound cheerful, but her voice betrayed her weariness. "Fine," he lied, pushing the cereal around with a spoon. "Mrs. Davis called me today," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "She's worried about you." Cameron flinched, his cheeks flushing with anger and shame. "She shouldn't have done that," he muttered. "She's concerned, Cameron. She says you're not doing well." "I'm fine," he insisted, his voice rising. "Just leave me alone." "I can't leave you alone, Cameron," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm your mother. I need to know what's going on." "Nothing's going on," he shouted, slamming his spoon down on the table. "I'm just tired." "Tired of what, Cameron?" she asked, her eyes filling with tears. "Tired of me? Tired of this life?" "Yes," he yelled, the word exploding from his lips like a pent-up scream. "I'm tired of everything. I'm tired of this stupid apartment, this stupid mattress, this stupid town. I'm tired of being poor, of being hungry, of being alone." The words hung in the air, heavy and hurtful. Sarah stared at him, her heart breaking. She knew he was hurting, she knew he was lashing out, but his words still stung. "I'm doing the best I can, Cameron," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "It's not good enough," he cried, tears streaming down his face. "It's never good enough." He pushed away from the table, his chair scraping against the floor. He ran to his room, slamming the door behind him. He threw himself onto the deflating mattress, burying his face in the thin blanket, his body shaking with sobs. Sarah stood in the kitchen, her own tears flowing freely. She felt like she was drowning, like she was failing everyone she loved. She didn't know what to do, how to fix things. She just knew that she couldn't go on like this. Something had to change. Officer Gaetano Acerra wasn't supposed to be working tonight. He'd traded shifts with Miller, who had a kid's birthday party to attend. Acerra didn't mind. He preferred the night shift. It was quieter, more peaceful. Less traffic, fewer domestic disputes. Or so he thought. He was cruising down Main Street, the radio crackling with the usual chatter. A drunk driver, a shoplifting incident, a cat stuck in a tree. He sighed, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. He'd been a police officer for 5 years now, and he still hadn't gotten used to the boredom. He'd joined the force because he wanted to make a difference, to help people. He'd grown up in a tough neighborhood and seen his share of poverty and hardship. He'd wanted to be a force for good, a protector of the innocent. But most days, it felt like he was just pushing paper, filling out reports, dealing with petty crime. The dispatcher's voice cut through the static. "Unit 3, respond to a 10 to 96 at 14 Elm Street, apartment 2B. Juvenile runaway." Acerra sighed again. Runaways. He hated those calls. Usually, it was just a teenager acting out, rebelling against their parents. He'd find them a few hours later, hiding at a friend's house or at the local park. He'd give them a lecture, take them home, and that would be the end of it. He flipped on his lights and siren, weaving through the sparse traffic. He pulled up in front of the apartment building, a grim, three-story structure with peeling paint and broken windows. It was the kind of place where hope went to die. He climbed the stairs, his boots echoing in the dimly lit hallway. He found apartment 2B, the door slightly ajar. He knocked, announcing his presence. "Police. Anyone home?" He heard a muffled sob from inside. He pushed the door open cautiously, his hand resting on his holster. He wasn't expecting trouble, but he'd learned to be prepared for anything. Cameron heard the knock, his heart pounding in his chest. He'd been lying on the deflating mattress, crying, his mind racing with a mixture of fear and determination. He was going to run away. He was going to leave this place, this life behind. But the sight of the police officer standing in the doorway, his uniform crisp and imposing, stopped him in his tracks. He felt a surge of panic, a fear of getting into trouble. He hadn't thought this through. He hadn't considered the consequences. Acerra stepped into the apartment, his eyes taking in the scene. It was small, sparsely furnished, with a lingering smell of stale food and despair. He saw a young boy, curled up on a deflated air mattress in the corner of a nearly empty room. The boy's face was tear-stained, his eyes red and swollen. He felt a pang of sympathy, a wave of sadness that washed over him. This wasn't a typical runaway. This was something different. I sat up, wiping at my wet face with the back of my hand. Are you here to arrest me?" I asked, my voice trembling. The officer knelt down, making himself less intimidating. "No, son. I'm here to help you." His voice was surprisingly gentle. Kind even. Acerra knelt down, trying to make eye contact with the boy. "I'm Officer Acerra," he said, his voice soft and reassuring. "What's your name?" "Cameron," the boy mumbled, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Cameron," Acerra repeated. "Can you tell me why you called 911? Cameron hesitated, his eyes darting around the room. He took a deep breath, his chest heaving with emotion. I wanted to run away," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Run away?" Acerra asked gently. "Why is that, Cameron?" Cameron began to explain, his words tumbling out in a rush. The move from Texas, the sick grandmother, the long hours his mother worked, the deflating mattress, the struggles at school, the fight. He told Acerra everything, his voice cracking with emotion, his tears flowing freely. Acerra listened patiently, his heart aching for the boy. He saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the despair in his posture, the emptiness of the room. He realized that this wasn't just a case of a teenager rebelling. This was a child crying out for help, a child drowning in a sea of hardship. As Cameron described his room, that is when Officer Acerra knew. This was beyond a simple talk. He looked around, the bare walls, the single light. No desk, no chair, nothing. Just that pathetic, deflating mattress. "Son," Officer Acerra said softly, "just wait here, okay?" Acerra walked back to his patrol car, his mind racing. He couldn't just leave Cameron in that empty room. It wasn't right. It wasn't humane. He thought about his own childhood, growing up in a cramped apartment with his single mother, struggling to make ends meet. He remembered the feeling of hopelessness, the constant worry about money, the longing for something more. He knew he couldn't solve all of Cameron's problems. He couldn't bring back his old life, his old friends, his old home. But he could do something. He could offer him a small measure of comfort, a glimmer of hope. He thought about the department's community outreach fund. It was meant for small-scale projects, things like buying school supplies for needy children or sponsoring a local youth sports team. He could probably get a few $100s, enough to buy Cameron a real bed, a desk, maybe even a chair. But it wouldn't be enough. He wanted to do more. He wanted to give Cameron a sense of normalcy, a feeling of being cared for. He thought about the old TV he had in his garage, the one he'd replaced with a newer model. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He made a decision. He'd use his own money, supplement the community outreach fund, and get Cameron what he needed. He'd do it tonight. He couldn't wait. He couldn't bear the thought of Cameron spending another night on that deflating mattress. He called the dispatcher, requesting to be taken off the runaway call. He explained the situation briefly, vaguely. He didn't want to get into details. He just wanted to be cleared to handle it his own way. He drove to the nearest 24-hour department store, his heart pounding with a mixture of determination and nervousness. He wasn't sure how this would all work out, but he knew he had to try. He had to do something. The store was brightly lit, almost eerily so, after the darkness of the night. The aisles were mostly empty, the only other customers a few late-night shoppers and a handful of stock clerks. Acerra felt a strange sense of urgency, a need to get this done quickly and efficiently. He headed straight for the bedding section, his eyes scanning the rows of mattresses and bed frames. He found a simple, twin-size bed frame, sturdy and affordable. He grabbed a mattress, a decent quality one, not too soft, not too hard. He added a set of sheets, a blanket, a pillow. He moved on to the furniture section, his mind racing. He found a small, basic desk, perfect for studying. He grabbed a matching chair, making sure it was comfortable and supportive. He thought about Cameron, sitting at the desk, doing his homework, feeling like a normal kid. He remembered the TV in his garage. He'd grab that later. He also thought about the Nintendo. He knew a guy, a local pawn shop owner, who often had used game consoles. He'd stop there on the way back. He pushed the loaded cart to the checkout, his heart filled with a strange mixture of excitement and anxiety. He was breaking protocol, bending the rules, but he didn't care. He was doing what he felt was right. The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, scanned the items, her expression indifferent. "That'll be $347.52, she said, her voice monotone. Acerra pulled out his wallet, his hands slightly trembling. He paid with his credit card, ignoring the small voice in his head that reminded him of his own bills and his own financial struggles. He'd figure it out. He always did. He loaded the furniture into the back of his patrol car, the boxes barely fitting. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a sense of purpose. He was doing something good, something meaningful. He was making a difference. He stopped by the pawn shop, hoping it was still open. Luckily, the owner, a gruff but kind-hearted man named Tony, was still there, counting the day's earnings. "Gaetano," Tony said, surprised. "What brings you here this late?" Acerra explained the situation, briefly, omitting the details about the runaway call. He asked Tony if he had any used Nintendo consoles. Tony smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I think I have just the thing," he said. He disappeared into the back room, returning a few minutes later with a dusty but functional Nintendo Wii, complete with a few games. "How much?" Acerra asked. Tony waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about it," he said. "It's on the house. For the kid." Acerra was overwhelmed by Tony's generosity. He thanked him profusely, his voice choked with emotion. He felt a renewed sense of hope, a belief in the goodness of people. He placed it carefully in his car. He was ready. Cameron had been lying on the mattress, staring at the ceiling, his mind numb with despair. He'd heard his mother crying in the kitchen, her sobs muffled but still audible. He felt a pang of guilt, a sense of responsibility for her pain. But he still couldn't bring himself to go to her to apologize. He heard a knock on the door, a firm, authoritative knock. He sat up, his heart pounding. He thought it might be the police again, coming to take him away. His mother opened the door, her eyes wide with surprise. She saw Officer Acerra standing there, his face calm and reassuring. Behind him, she saw the back of his patrol car, filled with boxes. Acerra saw the fear in the boy's eyes, the exhaustion on the mother's face. He smiled gently, trying to put them at ease. "Cameron," he said, "I brought you some things." He gestured towards the patrol car. Cameron and his mother stepped outside, their eyes widening with disbelief as they saw the boxes. Cameron's perspective. "I couldn't believe my eyes. A bed, a real bed, a desk, a chair. It was like a dream, a miracle." I looked at Officer Acerra, my heart filled with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice trembling. He smiled a genuine, heartfelt smile. "Because everyone deserves a good night's sleep," he said, "and a place to study, and a little bit of hope." Sarah stood beside Cameron, her mouth agape, tears welling up in her eyes. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. This police officer, this stranger, was showing them more kindness than she'd experienced in months. I don't know what to say, she stammered, her voice choked with emotion. You don't have to say anything, Acerra said gently. Just let me help. He began unloading the boxes, carrying them into the apartment. Cameron and Sarah helped, their movements hesitant at first, then filled with a growing sense of excitement. They set up the bed, the desk, the chair. The empty room began to transform to feel like a home. Acerra then brought out the TV and, finally, a box with a Nintendo. Cameron's face lit up. Pure, unadulterated joy. It's for you, son. A gift. The first night of my new bed was amazing. I sank into the mattress, the soft sheets cool against my skin. I felt safe and secure, like I could finally relax. I slept soundly, deeply for the first time in months. The next morning, I woke up feeling different, refreshed, hopeful. I sat at my new desk, my school books spread out in front of me. I actually wanted to do my homework. I wanted to catch up to succeed. My relationship with Mom started to change, too. We talked more and laughed more. The fight seemed like a distant memory, a bad dream. We were still struggling and still facing challenges, but we were facing them together. I wrote Officer Acerra a thank you note. I didn't have fancy stationery, just a piece of notebook paper, but I poured my heart into it. I told him how much his kindness had meant to me, how he'd changed my life. Cameron's grades improved dramatically. He started participating in class again, making friends, and even joining the school's chess club. He still had moments of sadness, moments of longing for his old life, but they were fewer and farther between. He was learning to cope, to adapt, to find joy in the small things. He never forgot Officer Acerra's kindness. He saw him around town sometimes, waved to him, and smiled. He knew he could never fully repay him, but he vowed to pay it forward, to help others in need whenever he could. He understood, now, the power of a single act of kindness, the ripple effect it could have on a person's life, on a community. Acerra kept Cameron's thank you note tucked away in his locker at the police station. He'd pull it out sometimes on tough days when he felt discouraged or disillusioned. It reminded him why he'd become a police officer, why he'd chosen a life of service. He didn't see himself as a hero. He'd just done what he felt was right. He'd seen a child in need, and he'd helped. It was that simple, but he also knew that it wasn't simple. He knew that most people wouldn't have gone to the lengths he did. He knew that his actions had made a real difference in Cameron's life. He continued to serve his community, to protect and to serve. He dealt with the usual calls, the domestic disputes, the traffic accidents, the petty crimes. But he also looked for opportunities to help, to make a positive impact. He knew that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could have the greatest impact. He found joy in helping others, even in the smallest of ways. The story of Officer Acerra's kindness spread throughout the community. The local newspaper ran a short article about it, highlighting his generosity and Cameron's transformation. People were touched and inspired. Donations poured into the police department's community outreach fund. Other officers were motivated to find ways to help those in need. The story became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was still goodness in the world. Cameron's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of human connection, and the importance of community support. It's a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, hope can bloom in the most unexpected places. It's a story about a boy who lost everything and a police officer who gave him back more than just a bed, a desk, and a TV. He gave him back his future. He gave him his life. It is also a call to action, a small suggestion that while grand gestures are wonderful, it is the everyday kindness, the reaching out, and the simple act of noticing those struggling around us that can truly stitch a community together. It doesn't take much to make a significant difference in a person's life. A little empathy, a little generosity, a little hope, these are the things that can change the world, one empty room at a time.